Probably everyone knows who a werewolf is. When people say it aloud, they imagine a creature with the head of a wolf, covered in thick black fur, walking on two legs. Medieval legends that terrified the population have regained their former glory, but now they have transformed into rumors and guesses. However, some claim that the mystical creature from old horror stories actually exists today. There are numerous accounts of encounters with this being. So, do werewolves exist or not? Let's try to figure it out. Werewolves are humans who transform into wolves, often during a full moon, and as a result, they acquire predominantly wolf-like senses: speed, strength, and agility. Change of appearance. Perhaps the most famous ability of a werewolf is the ability to transform into a wolf. In some traditions, a werewolf has the ability to do this at will. In the most popular stories, a werewolf changes during a full moon. The process of transformation can be almost instantaneous or last for hours. Sometimes it is depicted as painful or physically traumatic. A werewolf possesses supernatural strength and is often depicted as being stronger than either a human or a wolf would be in the natural world. Although werewolves are often larger in their wolf form than in their human form, their strength is typically portrayed as immense, even for their size. Increased speed. There's no denying that almost all werewolves are depicted as incredibly fast. They are almost always faster than any human or wolf in real life. This increased speed usually impacts the werewolf only when they are in wolf form. Immortality. The immortality of a werewolf is sometimes linked to its healing ability. Essentially because they can heal from most wounds or ailments, they effectively live forever. In other traditions, a werewolf is simply immortal, like many other supernatural beings, such as vampires. Case in Germany. In 1988, at the Hahn Air Base, American soldiers stationed there reported encountering a huge wolf that walked on two legs. During an evening shift, the soldiers on guard reacted to an alarm. Upon arriving at the scene, they came face to face with an unusual creature resembling a wolf that moved on two legs. According to descriptions, the creature stood about 8 to 9 feet tall, 2.4 times 2.7 meters. After growling angrily at the soldiers, the creature disappeared at lightning speed and effortlessly jumped over a 3-meter tall fence, then vanished into the darkness. Shortly after, the soldiers brought a search dog to track the intruder, but when the dog caught the scent, it trembled with fear and began to whine plaintively. Later, it became clear that there had been legends about this creature for many years. The story recounts that one of the soldiers from Napoleon's army, while deserting with others, began committing robberies. On one occasion, he attacked a farming family and was subsequently cursed by the farmer's wife. The curse took effect, and the soldier transformed into a dangerous predator that has been roaming the earth for 2 centuries, continuing to commit terrifying acts. The Beast from the Comey forests. This happened several years ago during a guard shift of a serviceman whose name is not disclosed. The military unit where the storyteller served was located 30 kilometers from the nearest settlement, surrounded by forests on all sides. The man was on night guard duty at a certain warehouse. For the next few hours, nothing unusual happened, and he noticed nothing strange. Soon, the man noticed a silhouette moving in the dark. The silhouette resembled a person, but was very tall. The creature approached the gates, and the flashlight beam fell on it. According to the description by the serviceman, the creature had the body of a dog, limbs like a human, and a head like a wolf. In his description, the man used the word werewolf. The unknown creature bared its teeth and stared at the soldier for several minutes before it turned around and disappeared in an unknown direction. While it was watching the soldier, the man was in a state of shock. He couldn't say anything or even move. After the story was told, the comrades had no doubt about their colleague's words as the storyteller's face showed a pale and frightened expression. Werewolf in the car. This incident occurred near Austin, the capital of Texas. In July 1999, waitress Hilda Kelly finished her evening shift at a fast food restaurant, and after getting into her car, set off home along a night road. After a while, the girl saw a person hitchhiking. She stopped, and the stranger jumped into the back seat of her car in an instant. The girl immediately realized that a real werewolf had entered her vehicle. The creature was covered in thick, reddish-gray fur, with fangs protruding from its mouth like a lion's. The girl was so terrified that she almost lost consciousness. Holding herself together, she continued to drive the car. Suddenly, the werewolf said that he was in a hurry, and mentioned that he dreamed of traveling all over America. Throughout this time, the girl tried to hide her fear from the stranger, which she managed to do through distracting conversations. Hello, my name is Alexi, and today I will tell you a real, scary story that has been passed down to me from the lips of my father. When I was 7, my father often took me with him to the forest to gather mushrooms and various berries. He told me how, in his childhood, his father took him on trips. He told stories about how they spent time there, sitting by the campfire, listening to the sound of the wind, and then sometimes the silence of the night forest. But when I grew a little older, at the time I was about 13, 14 years old, my father began telling stories that were scarier. When we once again went on a hike to our favorite place in the dark forest, he told me one very interesting and very frightening story. It happened in late autumn, during the heavy autumn rains and the arrival of harsh cold. My father, Sergei Ivanovich, along with his father, Ivan Stepanovich, went to the forest for an overnight stay. That October night was very cold. The temperature had almost dropped to 0, but in the forest there were no strong gusts of wind, and this saved many campers in the woods. My father and my grandfather set up camp. They pitched 2 single tents. They lit a fire. While my father was gathering firewood, my grandfather decided to make a meat stew. Time flew by unnoticed. It was getting noticeably colder outside. Finally, evening came. A cool autumn wind was blowing. My father listened to my grandfather's stories about what had happened in this forest many years ago. He told how people had gone missing in this forest. There were all kinds of evil spirits and other scary tales. My father wasn't a coward. He took all of my grandfather's stories as ordinary tall tales. But Grandpa said one thing: if he ever finds himself alone in the forest, he must not scream loudly or make a lot of noise, especially in the evenings like this one. An hour later, my grandfather went to sleep, saying that he was very tired from the day. Apparently, the search for a suitable place for a night's rest had really worn him out. He prepared for bed, and a few minutes later, he managed to fall asleep. My father stayed alone by the dying fire. He decided that he would stay near this warm and cozy hearth until dawn. He threw a couple of logs into the dying fire. He sat and contemplated all of his grandfather's stories. The most interesting one for him was about the werewolf that his grandfather had encountered in this forest. If only I could see a werewolf with my own eyes at least once, he thought, turning on his side and falling asleep. He woke up to a terrible roar coming from deep in the woods. The roar did not resemble that of a tiger or a lion. It sounded more like a wail, like the howl of wild dogs. He jumped in surprise and ran to his father's tent. But when he opened the tent, he found no one inside. Empty. How could this be? Where could he have gone? He whispered, fear written on his face. The roar repeated, but it was louder than before. It was heart-wrenching like a call. He crouched down, waiting to see the terrible beast. After 15 to 20 seconds, the roar repeated again. It was getting closer and closer. My father held his breath when he heard rustling in the bushes near his tent. It was him, the one he had heard about in his father's stories. It was the werewolf. This was not a made-up story to scare a little boy. This was a warning from a man who knew that something like this could happen. But how could he have known? This question tormented the little boy, who sat in his tent waiting for a face-to-face encounter with the monster. After a few minutes, everything fell silent. He quietly exited the tent and looked around. It was beginning to dawn outside. He heard the singing of birds and the gentle breeze that softly brushed against his cheeks. But where did my father go? The boy asked himself. He couldn't have died. He simply couldn't. With these words, the boy began to pack his things and set off in search of his missing father. A minute later, he discovered a bloody trail on the ground. It resembled a human footprint. The trail led into the dark bushes, behind which flowed a river. My father, having gathered all necessary things, set off in pursuit of an unknown beast. After a few minutes, he finally reached the fabled river. What he saw on the other side left him in shock. On the bank of the river, there was a cave, beside which lay the bloodied belongings of his father. He tried to find the bridge he had heard so many stories about. Once he crossed to the other side, he cautiously stepped towards his father's bloodied belongings. Examining them, he discovered a shattered lamp and a piece of torn clothing that belonged to his father. He made a torch from materials found on the riverbank and stepped into the cave. A terrible stench emanated from it, like rotten, putrid meat. He wandered through the cave for about 20-30 minutes, and still found some clues indicating that his father had been there. He found his father's watch, covered in blood. He also discovered a cigarette case and a leather jacket. Inside the cave, there was a small stream of water flowing down to the lower levels. Soon, the boy reached a dead end. In the dead end, he discovered his father's lifeless body. He was completely mutilated and bloodied. The little boy found a note next to him, which read, "Hello, son. If you are reading this, then I am probably no longer alive. I went to confront the roar of the mysterious beast. Perhaps it was the werewolf I saw 20 years ago. I know that I cannot defeat it, but such is my fate, to die at the hands of the mysterious creature that inhabits these woods. I beg you, if you are still reading this, pass on this story as a legend. The letter ended abruptly. My father heard the roar one last time. When he emerged from the cave into the open air, darkness enveloped the forest. He had no idea how much time he had spent searching for his father, but he would still have to face the killer. Amidst the trail in the thick of the woods, he saw two bright amber eyes that stared at him before disappearing into the darkness. Since then, my father had not seen this mysterious beast, but I too have heard the roars from deep within the forest. People who do not know what awaits them in the darkness head towards its call. The mystery of the disappearances in these places has been unwrapped. Whether this legend is true or not is for you to decide. It was the beginning of autumn. The taiga was falling asleep and preparing for winter. The snow hesitantly claimed new territories, day by day, whitening the ground soaked with the tears of thousands of captives. One day, when a thick fog hung over the hills from early morning, and the sun barely peeked out from behind the clouds, a group of prisoners was sent to work felling trees. It was at this moment that one of the guards noticed very strange tracks clearly visible on the snow. They were the footprints of bare feet. So what, you might think? But nothing. In Magadan at this time of year, it's at least -7 degrees, and a person who walked in the snow covered about 5 kilometers without falling or freezing. Initially, everyone thought it was the tracks of someone escaping from a neighboring camp. This was the most logical explanation that could come to the minds of the witnesses of this incident, but it was not to be. After 5 kilometers, the tracks began to change. Claw marks became visible, then the foot began to shorten and widen, and at one point, the tracks took on a character as if someone had been walking on all fours, having extremely deformed legs. The prints began to resemble a mix of a human foot and a wolf's paw, and just a few dozen meters later, there were the prints of huge wolf paws in the snow. The tracks were uninterrupted, meaning they were left by the very creature that initially had human legs, the impressions of which attracted the attention of the guards and prisoners at the beginning of their journey from the camp to the forest. That day, 11 prisoners disappeared. Yes, they tried to write it off as an escape, but everything was too strange. The bloody trails in the snow suggested that the prisoners were likely devoured by someone, and there were definitely creatures capable of it. A large number of wolves and bears inhabit the area to this day. However, such attacks had never happened before. Besides this circumstance, all day long, both prisoners and guards heard strange growling and howling noises coming from all directions. It did not resemble any animal. The sounds were a mix of a human's rasping and a dog's growl. Given such truly terrifying circumstances, the guards violated the regime severely. They left work at the camp 2 hours earlier than allowed. Even the fear of facing a tribunal did not stop them, and as they approached the camp gates, one of the guards turned around. What he saw filled him with a chilling terror, even many years after that day. At a distance of about 70 meters from the barracks, in the snow, walked H.E., a man covered in fur with an elongated wolf-like muzzle filled with sharp teeth. His eyes shimmered with all shades of red and watched the approaching people without blinking. There was always good lighting near the camps, so it was easy to see the details of this creature's appearance. Today I want to share a story that happened to my cousin. This took place 3 years ago, but my sister forbade me to tell anyone about it. She feared that they would think she was crazy. In early 2020, Katya died in a car accident. I hope she won't be upset with me. Yes, I believe that the dead know everything, and that our loved ones watch over us, the ones left on Earth, even after death. Most of my friends whom I told everything to don't believe me. They think I'm a bit off since my sister's death, but I know this really happened. In 2017, Katya was getting married. Her chosen one was Andre, a handsome, kind, attentive guy. They studied at the same university. It was love at first sight. Katya told me how beautifully he courted her. Sometimes he would call right in the middle of the night. "I miss you so much, look out the window." Katya would open the shutters and a bouquet of wildflowers would fly to her. Immediately after graduation, they had a modest wedding. They made such a beautiful couple. There were a lot of guests from the bride's side at the ceremony. Parents, relatives, friends, and classmates. On the groom's side, there was only one friend of his, and he left the celebration quite soon. Even then, I found it strange, but I said nothing to my sister. She was very happy. The young couple decided to live apart from their parents and rented a one-room apartment. Andre got a good job, though he often had to go on business trips. And Katya told me that one evening, Andre came home late, was agitated, and kept glancing out the window as if waiting for someone. Then, without saying a word, he rushed out of the apartment. He wasn't home all night. Katya called his mobile, but it turned out that his phone was lying at home on the nightstand. Andre returned only in the morning, and he looked very strange. His shirt was dirty, and he had pine needles and dry leaves in his hair, and his cheek was scratched. He said that he met some old friends. They went to a bar and overdid it with the drinks. They walked home through the park. There, he felt unwell, and then he couldn't remember anything more. For some time after that, everything was wonderful for Katya and Andre. My sister even started thinking about having a baby, but then something unexpected happened. A former classmate of Katya invited friends to spend the weekend at his grandfather's remote forest lodge. The forest ranger greeted the guests warmly, but his dog, bristling with fur and growling deeply, hid in the kennel and then ran away. We walked in the forest, sat by the fire, and then went to sleep. The next day, the guys went hunting with Ilya Mikhailovich, while the girls went for a quiet hunt, looking for mushrooms. In the evening, the boys didn't return for a long time. It got dark. They came back downcast and very tired. Everyone except Andre. He disappeared, without a trace. No one noticed when. They searched for him for a long time, but in vain. The police and rescuers joined the search. All efforts were fruitless. A month passed like this. Katya began to visit the forest ranger more often. She kept asking if there were any news about Andre. Ilya Mikhailovich said that there were all sorts of rumors, but he never specified what they were. Katya decided to go to Andre's mother and inform her about her son's disappearance. What she learned from the mother left both Katya, and later me, in shock when my sister shared everything she found out from her mother-in-law. Their neighbor and classmate even invited Andre to spend the last holidays before the final year at his grandmother's house, in a Belarusian village surrounded by forests. Fierce battles took place here during the Great Patriotic War. The boys spent all their days in the woods. They became fascinated with digging up military trophies. One night, they found themselves far from the village and got lost, wandering through the thickets for a long time. But when they finally stumbled upon a familiar path, tragedy struck. On one of the hills against the backdrop of the huge round moon, a silhouette of a large beast suddenly appeared. Letting out a guttural growl, it charged at them. Ivan reached the bunker they had recently explored and squeezed inside, but Andre didn't make it. Ivan heard his friend scream. But when everything fell silent and the boy emerged from his shelter, he couldn't find his friend's body. The next day, the entire village was alerted. They searched for the boy for 2 days. On the third day, he returned on his own. He wouldn't say where he had been. He insisted he didn't remember. He was covered in wolf fur, stained with blood in places, but had no wounds. Since that time, Andre began to disappear during the full moon, and remains of various animals and clumps of wolf fur were found in the area. After hearing this, Katya finally lost her peace. She went back to the forester. The following account is from Katya's perspective. The full moon illuminated the vast field with a pale light, and the freshly mowed homestead stood surrounded by wooden feeding troughs with roofs. I was walking towards the boundary of light in the dark edge of the forest. I passed the fence, a chilling howl echoed nearby, and suddenly 2 red eyes like flames raced towards me. I ran with all my strength, but the beast was catching it up. I could feel it somewhere to the side. A thought flickered. It wants to cut off my way to the cabin. My breath quickened, my strength almost gone, and suddenly the night silence was shattered by a gunshot. Ilya Mikhailovich stood in the dark doorway. In surprise, I fell. Glancing back, I saw a huge creature resembling a wolf but much larger leap high into the air, then land on the ground and quickly disappear. It melted into the darkness. The forester brought me into his house and began to give me a strong tincture to calm me. He left me there for the night, and in the morning, he urged me to leave as quickly as possible and never come back. For almost 3 years, Katya waited for Andre's return. She waited until her death. Even during her sister's lifetime, I began to collect and study any materials on werewolves and lycanthropy. I continue to this day. Moreover, I am not studying cases of lycanthropy where a person believes they are a werewolf. I am researching real cases of human transformation into beasts. It turns out there are many such cases. I can say that I am still at the very beginning of my research. 1. Misfortune and loss. Each of the stories has a theme of loss, whether it be the loss of a human life, the disappearance of a loved one, or traumatic events. The werewolf here plays the role of a dark omen, symbolizing the misfortune and horror that can happen at any moment. 2. Exploring human relationships. Some stories deal with family and romantic relationships, showing how fear and uncertainty can destroy human relationships. In this context, the werewolf becomes a symbol of lost control and betrayal, emphasizing the fragility of the vanity of human life. 3. The unknown nature of a creature. All stories leave the reader with questions about what werewolves really are. They become a symbol of the mysterious, the unknowable, sparking an interest in exploring myths that have been repeated throughout the age. In the end, the werewolf stories presented serve not only an entertainment purpose, but also raise important questions about fears, loss, myths, and how we modern humans interpret and react to the supernatural aspects of our lives.